Okay, YouTubers, Spaceman AUS here again. I just wanted to talk to you about these man-made UFOs that I got to see as a child. Now, when I was 9 year old, Victorian Railway. Well, I'll start at the beginning. How I got to see it, right, was because my nana, she used to sit in the doorway between the lounge room and the kitchen, right? She had a portable TV beside her that she'd plug the earphone jack in one ear, watch the TV in the lounge room, and also had the radio going in the kitchen. And she'd just tune in on whatever caught her fancy. Well, we were over at my grandparents' at the time watching the first colour movie to ever come to Australia that was recorded in colour, because we only had a black and white telly. And I think it was called The Jewel of the Nile or something like that. But anyway, a bit of a love scene had came onto the show, and I wasn't really interested in the love scene, so I went back out in the kitchen to pick out on my nan's cakes and biscuits and stuff that we used to make every weekend, or I used to help her make every weekend. And mainly I licked the bowls for her, but anyway, I was out there picking out on the biscuits and stuff. Well, the guy on the radio had claimed that, people in Fawkner, if you race outside right now, you may get to see your very first UFO. Reports are coming in as he spoke. So I raced off into the lounge room and said, hey, quick, there's supposed to be a UFO outside, And everyone looked at me and, oh, yeah, okay, be there in a minute, and they just kept watching their show. Well, I raced out the back door of my nan's house, right? And here it was, this thing coming over the fence. Now, this is what it looked like. It was just a big black disc-shaped UFO. And underneath it, it had like this big red ring, which was about 10 foot round. And then these other 5 rings that were 2 foot round between the outside of the ship and that inner ring. And it made a noise, like if you were inside your house, you would not know this was sitting above your roof. All right, now, this thing come over directly over my nan's roof, not much faster than walking pace, and about 40 foot off the ground. I probably could have climbed on the roof and touched it if I wanted to. It was moving that slow and that low to the ground. I reckon I could have touched it if I wanted to. I'm glad I never did, but I think these red rings are actually glowing coils, a bit like an element in your oven, because they didn't produce light, they just produced this red glow. So anyway, I watched this thing disappear into the darkness sort of thing. My brother came out sort of like when it was far away, and I could only see the red glow underneath. You couldn't really see the craft. He claimed he saw it, but I had my doubts, But anyway, it turns out that it was actually built by Victorian Railway Company. And they built this thing and test flew it over people in Fawkner because my nana lived next door to this railway company, basically. Right? So that's why it flew over her house. And they were asking the government for funding to build one big enough to carry 200 passengers. Right? And the government refused. They said, no, we're not going to invest in unproven technology, even though they had this thing flying around. So the railway company gave them a deadline and said, well, we'll give you 2 weeks to think about it, and if you don't give us the money, we're going to publish the plans in the paper so that anyone who had the money could build their own. And they actually did this. At the 2-week deadline ended, they didn't get their money and they published it. The paper was like about 1 inch thick, and I used to get the paper from my grandfather, go to the shop and get it. And I was racing home because I knew how this paper had the plans to build this UFO in it. But I knew nothing about suppression or anything back then. I was only 9 years old, Knew nothing about that, And I get home to my grandparents' place and I open this thing up on the table, and sure enough, there's all this schematics on how to build this anti-gravity vehicle. And I just wish I knew about suppression because I would have kept that paper all my life, I've even tried to look up the archives and that, but the newspapers have changed hands and merged together and all sorts of crap back then, you know, so, or since then, you know, so I don't know how to look it up, you know. But anyway, it's all real, guys. We've had anti-gravity since 76 that I know of. Alright? Sorry, not 76, it would have been 72 or something. Right, because I was about 8 years old. Now, so that was the one built by the Victorian Railway. I also lived in West Meadows, right, which in Broadmeadows, which was the neighbourhood next door, was the military base. And they had this paddock that they used to play war games in. And we used to do the same thing, you know, we used to go in there with our slug guns and shoot at each other, you know, because in Melbourne it's cold, you know, and you're wearing thick clothing and that, so, you know, we used to put helmets on and go in there and play war games, you know, and we'd shoot each other with slug guns. Pretty crazy, but anyway, in the paddock was all these big round bushes, about, you know, 12 feet round or so. And they were perfect, you know, for hiding under and stuff, you know. Well, when the game had ended, basically, we'd all come out from under this tree and started to walk out from around it to leave the paddock. And it was just a barbed wire fence we used to climb through, you know. It wasn't like fenced off securely or anything, it was pretty open. But we come out from behind this bush and walked out behind this here, right? Now we came out behind it here, like from this side, so this guy flying this device, this soldier, he didn't see us at all. He just was levitating in the air past us. Now I'm walking behind him here underneath it, you know, like walking behind, and I'm looking up in this cage here, like trying to see some helicopter blades or something, you know, that was making this thing fly, because I was thinking at first it was some sort of silent helicopter that they'd had a cage around so that it could go in amongst trees and that wouldn't be destroyed, you know. But I walked behind this for quite a bit, you know, and I saw nothing inside it, and nothing spinning, no noise. This thing made no noise. That other UFO, it made a noise like like that. It sort of reminds me today of a transformer building up charge and dissipating sort of thing over and over. But anyway, this thing though, it made no noise. But looking at it today also, I believe this is sort of working on the lifter, high voltage lifter principle you see on YouTube. Now, I was close enough to see that this framework was all made out of angle-iron steel and was all bolted together. You know, and I think they bolted it together because it had to be insulated from one another or something. And I thought this was actually a motor at the time. But the reason I know what it is now is because a mate of mine, I went to take him and his girlfriend out. I was chaperoning him and going to take him out to a nightclub. So I had to pick him up from his father's place. Now, it turns out his father was part of the Freemasons. I didn't know this at the time, but while I'm waiting for him outside the bathroom, on the phone table next to me was a book with a picture of this on the cover. And I was, oh wow, you know, like I've always wondered what this bloody thing was, you know. So I picked the book up and I read the description and that. Well, it turns out, and my mate freaked out when he saw me reading this, you know, like he made me put the book back exactly how I found it, all this business, you know. And when his father died, I tried to get this book, but his sister had cleaned the place up. I didn't find out until about a month later, you know, that because my mate, he lives at the other end of the other side of the country sort of thing, you know. And we sort of only kept in touch here and there. And when I'd found out his father had died, you know, a month and a half or two went by, had already gone past, and the sister had given all these books to some book shop. But anyway, because I tried to offer him money to find this book for me, you know, and even his sister and that, but she told me, you know, she fears that it had already gone. But anyway, in the book what it said was that this was actually a miniature nuclear power station. and it was feeding 150,000 volts into this grid above him, right? And this cage he was sitting in was like a Faraday cage to prevent him getting any electrical arcs or shocks from this power grid up above him. And that's how it levitated around. Okay, so yeah, and that's why I think it was working on that lifter principle. But that one, the Victorian Railway, this other one, it was really advanced. And you know, you've got to remember, this is back in 76 or 74 sort of thing, you know, like, so what the hell they got now? Be way ahead. Alright? So I've always known all my life, guys, that we've got anti-gravity. And if you fly into Victoria at night time, right, now you've got to remember that Egyptian story I told earlier about the pictures on the ground. If you fly into Melbourne at night time, all the freeways are coloured up in different coloured lights. There's green, there's blue, there's pink, there's yellow, and they all make different pictures, kilometres in size, right? And you only see them at night time, and only see them you know, when you're flying into Melbourne. And I got to see that when I came flying in from Adelaide one night, and the plane had to circle for a bit of time to, you know, because there wasn't a runway available. So while he was circling Melbourne, he told us to look out the windows and that, and showed these pictures that the freeways made, you know, the different coloured lights made on the freeways. And I think they did that to attract UFOs. And that's why I think probably we have that technology for so long, is because they made contact a long time ago. Alright? So they are keeping all this from you people. Alright? I'm really annoyed about it, because I grew up as a child, because I got to see these things as a child. You know, I grew up, when I saw that plans in the paper, I didn't think about keeping the paper. I just rubbed my hands together thinking how great things were, you know, and by the time I'm old enough to have a license, we're going to be flying around in anti-gravity vehicles and that, you know, it's going to be awesome, you know, space travel and all that business. But they didn't. They kept it for themselves. And all nations know this stuff is true. They're all working on this deep space projects and that, you know. And it's a real shame, you know, because one whistleblower a while ago was claiming that some of these worlds we've found that are similar to Earth, they've already travelled to them, all right? And they've found primitive life forms on this planet, much like our cavemen back in our day, right? And they're apparently, and China and America, Russia, they're all in on it, right, together. And they've landed there, and they're now acting to these primitive people as their gods, right? And sharing technology. They're not sharing technology, they're enslaving them, all right? They've made them their slaves and acting like they're gods. This disgusts me, all right? It really does, you know, because they had no right to do any of that. Alright, this is technology that belongs to everybody. You know, the only reason they get people to populate, you know, like to breed constantly like they do, is to turn over all the money they need to build all this off-world stuff, dig up the resources to take with them into space, and also because the fact that every 100 years there's a genius born. Alright? And they are collecting all them people, those great minds, to reverse engineer or to build the technology they need to get away from this earth. They do not care about us, all right? They have used us and used us just for this purpose, to give themselves the power to enslave us eventually. And as you can see now with this one world government, it's getting closer every day, all right? But they're not doing all this for our benefit. They're doing it for their own, all right? And if you don't all wake up and start admitting the truth about who the gods were, what was around in the ancient times, we'll never ever get to see these people. They cannot show themselves while we've got this religious mindset, you know, thinking that these gods are something that they're not, like they owe us something. All right, we were their slaves, mate. They're not going to come here and resurrect you and save you and all that. All that's about is cloning and stuff, you know. That's the only way they're going to resurrect you. So all you people killing yourselves in the name of your God, you're not going to go to heaven. There is no heaven. They built heaven on earth, remember? You know, what was heaven? Was it another planet they came from called heaven? Or a city that they called heaven? You know? I mean, the Sumerian text tells the truth. And that's where all your religions came from. And if you pay attention to what you're being told, it's all scientific stuff. You know, they're talking about our body breaking down and turning into light and energy, you know, and being absorbed back into the universe and to recreate life again somewhere else. But that don't mean you're going to remember any of this life. You're not even going to, you've got nothing, it may have nothing to do with this life. People have memories, you know. I'm going to talk to you a bit about your blood, all right? Now, with the blood, they now know they can record 20,000 CDs on one blood cell alone. Now, I wanted to do a talk about this, and I probably should talk about it in another video about telepathy and stuff, right? Because your history of your ancestry is all in your DNA, in your blood. Your blood's like the hard drive of our biological computer. All right, now, these grey aliens, what they do, you know, the fallen angels in the Bible and stuff, well, they are a biological computer like us as well. A bit more advanced than us, actually, but they were made for a purpose. All right, to inhabit worlds that don't have atmospheres, and you know, they don't have nervous systems. They cover their same colour as us, but they cover themselves in a grey paste. You know, like if they want to walk around the surface of the moon, they cover themselves in this grey paste, and they absorb their oxygen and food through that paste, right? And they can walk on the surface of the moon without a spacesuit. All right, they are a biological computer made for that purpose. And some of them got annoyed because they didn't get the ability to breed like we do, all right, and have free will to do what they want, what we want, you know. They are like a slave race to the superior beings that created them. And some of them rebelled and got left on Earth, and, you know, that's what the fallen angel story is really all about. But all these abductions that you see, that's about keeping the record by collecting the DNA. And that's why they can, read your memories and all that stuff. They're not reading your mind, they're reading the information on your blood, all right? And when people claim that they have lived before or they remember a past life, what that is that their DNA, their DNA encryption, right, is very similar to an ancient ancestor of theirs from the past. So when they were born, their brain was able to decrypt the information, the history of that ancient ancestor. And they remember it like it's their own memories, right? But it's not their own memories, it's just that they're reading the memories of that ancient ancestor. Okay, whether we're being manipulated to remember that, you know what I mean? Because the ancient, or these aliens want us to remember our past, which is possible. But that's really what it's all about. And all this meditation, you know, you see all these different people doing, that's all, they've sort of gotten confused about what really was going on. Because in the ancient times and that, these advanced races and that, they didn't have telephones or use telephones to communicate. They used telepathy. All right, they talked to each other directly in their minds to each other. And when you do this stuff, like in telepathy, everything's connected throughout the whole universe. All right, even objects are connected, and you can tune in on anything, you know, like, and I'm going to explain that in another story because it's a bit involved, but basically these ancient people would go in telepathy and seek advice or information or talk to other people from their home world, you know, and when you do this business, you look like you're dead, right? No crap. People have woken up in the freezer that have been astro traveling at the morgue because they were declared dead. That's how slow your body becomes, right? You can't detect your breathing, your heartbeat, or any of that business, right? But you don't turn blue or anything because you're not dead. You just slow down to undetectable levels, right? And I also believe this is how come they lived a long period of time, because when you're in that astro state and your body has slowed down, that means your aging's slowing down as well. And I think that's how these prophets or people, shamans and whatever, lived longer, because they spent so much time in that astro plane. I also believe this because and the mummification of the bodies and stuff, they are trying to replicate what the ancient advanced races were doing. Because you know how if you look up stasis giants on YouTube and you find those giants that they found, one was, and they're in mint condition, they're not mummified like normal mummies, they're not wrapped up in bandages or anything like that, but they haven't decayed. Their bodies are still perfect, you know, in size and form and everything. But one of them was grey, like the liquid that was in that sarcophagus had leaked out. But one of them they found was still submerged in liquid, like a pink liquid. And I'm thinking that's a liquid like in the womb, you know, that supplied them their food, nutrients and oxygen. And they would go into this astro state and then get submerged into that solution, because their body doesn't need to breathe like us. And also you can breathe that liquid, you know what I mean, even if you are conscious. Right, now I believe they submerged themselves in that liquid and then entered into the astro plane so that they could go into like a stasis, you know, and stay in the astro plane, exploring the universe and, you know, keeping in touch with their own people and whatever. And that because they were put in that liquid and preserve their bodies, as long as their bodies were preserved on Earth, they could stay there forever. You know what I mean? And I think that's where people are getting the meditation wrong. Okay. And I'm going to do a video also about meditation, because I was taught that, right, by these two gorgeous blonde ladies who claimed they were nurses, right? But after I see that the Palladians were all blonde-haired, blue eyes, and beautiful, these girls were exactly that. They were gorgeous, both of them, blue-eyed, blonde hair. They taught me how to astro travel, okay? And it's real and it's easy to do. The main thing is the questions you ask. You've got to ask the right questions, okay? And I'm going to explain that in my astro traveling video, okay? So that'll be the next one I do. Alright, I'm going to leave it off here. Spaceman AUS.